going to move right on to item 10, conduct of business. Our first item is A, adopt a resolution amending stage 2 of the city's water shortage contingency plan.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, tonight's report updates previous information that has been presented to and discussed by the City Council by providing you with information about the recent mandates, both of the State Water Water Resources Control Board and the Governor himself, and what we're proposing to do about that. We have a small action for you to consider tonight, which in a moment Jim Birch will explain to you. But most importantly, I wanted to point out that this presentation is primarily for public information purposes, to assure that members of our community maintain a highest level awareness of the urgent and continuing need to conserve water. The city recognizes both its role to provide information, public education, and to promote water conservation awareness among the public. But we also recognize that as a larger water user in the community, that the city itself has a responsibility to demonstrate leadership in its own operations. To that end, we wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about some of the actions that we've taken and to highlight those so that the public can see its city leadership doing what we're asking members of the public to do. With our actions to assure that our city facilities, our indoor facilities, are outfitted with low-flow water devices, as well we are eliminating and or cutting back on outdoor landscape irrigation. This includes irrigation at our public facilities, in street medians, as well as at our parks and other recreation facilities, including our active play fields. We recognize that these actions may have an effect on the community use and enjoyment of these critical facilities, and we commit to continuing both to monitor the water use and to manage our drought response with the intent to minimize the effect that these important facilities or the cutback in water use will have at these important facilities. So before I turn it over to Jim Birch, our Deputy Public Services Director tonight, I wanted to call attention for a moment to some of the displays that we have here in the City Council chambers tonight, and to let you know that those materials, and I think they are very helpful informational pieces, that these items will be on display in City Hall, and we will have other resources available both at City Hall as well as at our other public contact facilities at our library and our recreation center. We have some handouts here tonight as well as some gadgets to help people pay attention to and minimize their own personal water use. And I would also invite you to visit the city's website at www.sanbruno.ca.gov, where you can find a variety of information about water use, about water conservation, and importantly about tips that even those of us in San Bruno who have been conserving water for some time now may have overlooked, and we may be able to do even better as we are now being challenged to do. And with that, I turn it over to Jim to give you some of the specifics.
Thank you. As most of you have seen in the news, California is entering their fourth year of drought. And while many of our residents have made adjustments already in their water use, we've brought to you tonight a resolution that would amend the city's water shortage contingency plan that would comply with the latest restrictions. Tonight I wanted to discuss the proposed outdoor water restrictions that have been communicated with us, and more importantly, how they're going to impact our residents and what our staff will be doing to educate, track, and report our efforts and what additional steps maybe people can take that maybe have already conserved water, but they're looking for additional ways to do that. And finally, I'll add a little bit more to what Connie had suggested about what the city staff departments are doing, a little bit more detail on how we're adjusting our water use. On April 1st, the governor's executive action called for an overall mandatory water restriction throughout California of 25%. But it was based on gallons per capita per day, and it gave some direction to the water board that said, we want you to take this into account when you set up water use restrictions. And in your packet, you'll see each listed quite a bit of the cities and agencies throughout California and their gallons per capita per day. And the city of San Bruno is doing pretty good, actually, at 58.5 in the month of September. That's the month they use as a high use month. And a lot of other agencies are into hundreds and 200s and 300s. So what the water board had done is set up a tiered system so that those who are using more gallons per capita per day would have to conserve more than agencies that are on the lower end in the 40s and 50s and so forth. We've been in communication with BOSCA and also with the water board to roll with the changes. They've been kind of fast and furious. BOSCA has, on our behalf and the other agencies that are in BOSCA, submitted comments to the water board. Since they're taking comments over a period, they'll vote May 5th on the regulatory framework that they've introduced to the agencies. The water board, BOSCA had got together with our members and said, well, how are we going to implement these restrictions? And what we decided to do was have a unified approach so that whatever restrictions we had to take were consistent with Millbrae or Daly City and so forth. So mainly how these restrictions will impact our residents is that the restrictions are that outdoor watering can only occur on 2 days per week. And secondly, that you can't water outdoors during a measurable rainfall or 48 hours after measurable rainfall. Of course, that begs the question, how do you enforce all that? And I'll get to that piece. But what we decided to do and what's in front of you tonight is to select the days that people would be watering. So how it would impact our residents if you adopt the resolution would be that for odd numbered addresses, they would be allowed to irrigate on Mondays and Thursdays. Even numbered addresses would be Tuesdays and Fridays. And if you didn't have an address, it would be on Mondays and Thursdays. So how does that relate to, and what are we going to have to do as far as staff to comply with these regulations? The other regulations that don't really impact the residents but impact us as a water supplier are that we have to now report enforcement actions or track calls for water waste. So when people call us, which they do, especially in the summertime, and report the neighbor that's watering too much, we have to track that, report it monthly to the water board. They are ramping up their enforcement, I would call it a setup, setting up what they're going to do to come down and require us maybe next year if things continue, what we have to do for enforcement. But for now, we just have to report the calls for water waste. We also have to notify our customers of water leaks, and we have to do so promptly. And again, to reduce water waste, so that's the key. And I'll talk a little bit more about water leaks and water waste in the next agenda item. So again, we wanted to have a uniform approach, and that's our proposal in the resolution. The question comes up, well, what happens if people don't comply with this outdoor watering restrictions? What is it that we're going to do as a staff? We have always had the policy of making direct contact with our citizens and hanging a door hanger, or we call a door tag, that let people know that they've got a violation or a possible violation, phone number to call, and that sort of thing. We would try to make personal contact. So we're going to do that. And on the second violation at the same address, for example, we would send a letter, again with a reminder of what the water waste was, and try to make contact. But we do have an obligation under the requirements that if we have repeated infractions, that we are to take enforcement actions. So we have the ability to assess a civil penalty or administrative fine up to $500. And internally, we're working on exactly how that process would take place and working with code enforcement. one of the questions that our building folks get is, I'm already cutting back, I've already got the low flow shower heads, I've already done some changes with my irrigation, what else can I do? Well, one of the things we tell people is, you're doing the right thing, and that's great, and some of these regulations are obviously made for people who might not have made those adjustments yet. So where that comes into play, we send people to our website, or we talk them through, maybe they haven't replaced their toilet yet, and we have a toilet rebate program, or they don't have a shower timer, and so we send them information, and as the city manager noted, we do have the tips that are in large format, but we also have handouts. And this Saturday, we also have a water efficient landscape class. That's at the rec center. So there's all kinds of different ways that people can learn about effective and efficient water use. The other thing that we're doing internally is we're working with our Parks Community Services Department, and they've already made a lot of cutbacks, and we're working with them, and we may do a sign like this. Our staff was at a Bosca meeting today, and they like the idea too. It's very simple, a little bit larger. This is just a sample. We may do some lawn signs at city facilities so people know that it's kind of going brown, or there's adjustments with the landscaping, and we're doing our part to save water. We're also going to make these available if people want them at the counter to put in their own lawn, so that when the neighbor sees their lawn, at least they know that it's a conscious decision and a conscious effort. So we continue to get calls. It's sort of ramped up with the things in the media. People are asking questions about what we can do, what's going to happen, will I get in trouble, that sort of thing. We're going to be heavy on the public education. We've also sent people to the Bosca website, which is bawsca.org. And then questions about the drought, we send them to the ca.gov /drought. And that has everything to do with the drought conditions and the potential changing regulations and requirements that they consider to continue to consider moving forward. So the question also was, what's the financial impact for this resolution in front of you tonight? We anticipate that we'll have increased staff time to deal with some of the water waste calls, the potential water waste calls we get as we go to 2-day restrictions on irrigation and people make adjustments. We're also, when people call in, some people do not know how to adjust their water timers for the irrigation, and we're offering free assistance to do that. Our staff will meet with them on site and work through the dreaded irrigation timer. It used to be the VCR timer, now it's the irrigation timer. So we're willing to do that too, because a lot of people don't know how to change it, or if the electricity went off, it resets and they're not quite sure. So we're willing to do that as well. The alternatives to the resolution in front of you tonight would be to not approve the resolution, but failing to comply with the regulations as set forth by the Water Board and the Governor's executive action could result in a cease and desist order and fines up to $10,000 per day. You also could provide direction to staff regarding additional or alternative water use reduction strategies and requirements in order to meet the state mandates. Our recommendation tonight is to adopt the resolution, which would amend the Stage 2 of the Water Shortage Contingency Plan to include those outdoor water restrictions to 2 days, and to prohibit irrigation during and 48 hours after rainfall event. And I'm available for questions.
Good. Any questions for staff? Ken?
Jim, what about multi-residential complexes? I've heard complaints from landlords saying that, it's all included, that, the renters just, they don't know how to conserve. So is there some forum or something that we can, educate or help those property owners and those facilities, educate their tenants, their residents?
I think it's a good comment. We've got some requests from people and inquiries about, well, the irrigation's going off at this big complex, what do we do? Our plan is to try to contact the homeowners or the condo owner if we can. We may end up in a situation where we literally have to wait for a phone call to help people. We can't maybe determine who's living in a multifamily unit. But if we see the landscape, and this is the big restriction is for outdoor water use, so we can at least send a letter through our billing system to whoever's getting the bill. So if they don't get individual bills, we can at least do outreach to the owner. But that's a tricky one to try to reach those folks.
Anything else?
Through the chair.
Irene?
Thank you. Just anecdotally, if one of our beautification task force members recently changed their landscaping over to drought-tolerant landscaping, and previously they would generally use 22 units of water, and now they're down to 7 units of water. So that's something really to look at. There's a program called Lawn Be Gone, where we actually help pay for you changing over your lawn to drought-tolerant landscaping. So it's could be quite a savings, not only in water itself, but in the cost of the water and the cost of the landscaping. So I think that's something great that we're doing. Also, and may this never happen, but if we do end up fining people because of the drought, or if the drought continues next year and gets really tight, I'd like us to consider putting any fines that we do receive aside in a separate funding account, and that money could be used for things related, drought-related things. The other thing I was thinking about, we have in our capital improvement program the money set aside to have a landscaping plan for the City Hall area. And I know it's supposed to be drought tolerant as well. I was just thinking, and maybe some of you guys have been here, who've been here a while, we had at one point a parking plan that was related to the expansion of the library, and it had to do with doing angle parking on the Lindens, on the City Hall side of Linden, into the grass, part of the grass area, which would be helpful. You know, it would cut down on the grass, and it would add parking, and it could be integrated with the. And I brought a thing here, the traffic. And we did it at Bel Air School, where we put in a storm drain, catch basin type thing. Remember for Sustainable Street, where they put in, it's drought tolerant plants, but also it percolates any storm water down and cleans it before it gets down to the groundwater. So I'd like us to revisit that whole plan if possible. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Rico?
Really quick, it's just on the communication and education. I think it's always key, even though it is on everyone's radar. When you start assigning days and stuff, I just think it's sometimes challenging. So I know it mentions the website, and I know it mentions cable TV and however else. I just think we really need to think outside the box on ways to educate and inform. I believe at the East Bay Mud customers, I think they just are receiving, or will be July 1st, a 25% surcharge, which I think, if I was correct, was like an average is going to go from $48.60 to $60.25. And that'll happen July 1st, even if they're not, shall we say, using too much water. That's just because they think the drought is so serious and they are concerned for next year, what that may bring. So, again, I know steps need to be taken, we need to be compliant, but I also want to make sure that we're reaching out to our residents and doing it beyond just the means of San Bruno Cable and the website.
Anyone else? Any action by the council on this item?
I'd like to introduce the resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Before we move to 10B, I just have one comment regarding all of this and more of a concern, and that is fireworks. I know that there's probably a small chance that this council would ban fireworks for this season, but I do want to impress upon the staff, especially fire and police, how aggressively I'd like the fireworks ordinance and all of the things that we do to try to enforce our existing rules and regulations. I want them enforced very emphatically and very aggressively this year, and maybe maybe Connie, you can say something regarding that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have had some discussion at the staff level, and the fire department in particular is aware of the need to carefully monitor drought-related, but other issues related to higher than normal fire hazard danger. And certainly as the landscape becomes a little bit more dry and unfortunately, even as a little bit of rain comes at times of the year like now when the landscape is starting to dry out and then it gets a little bit of a spurt of growth, it actually can create an even more dangerous situation. So our fire department is watching carefully. I think your caution is well observed, and we would certainly advise the city council accordingly if there's any potential of us getting to the point of some sort of a fire hazard emergency. But we're alert to that, and we'll keep you informed.
All right, thank you.
Through the chair, since you
Rico.
bring this up, but I think also our city has to lead by example. So if we're having some vegetation or it's brown, I think we need to take care of it as well. I also know that the airport property, when the goats go out, sometimes it's not coordinated. We should try to get that. I know I've made efforts, but I think the city should make an effort as well so that we make sure we take care of everything that we can.